We begin my top 24 remaining tight end rankings with tight ends that I think are mid to low end tight end twos. We have Austin Hooper, Tommy Tremble, Tyler Conklin, Noah Gray, Noah Fant, Juwan Johnson, Pat Fryermuth, and Jake Ferguson. Fun fact, since week 10, Austin Hooper has had no less than 4 targets in all but one game. And so even though he's the tight end 2 in New England, they use quite a bit of 12 personnel. And so with the target consistency, that's really all you can ask for out of your low end tight end 2. And so I think he's a decent floor option. It's just that the ceiling is quite limited if he doesn't score a touchdown. Tommy Tremble has regained his position as the tight end 1 in Carolina, at least for the time being. I don't think he's remotely close to as talented as Jatavian Sanders, specifically as a pass catcher. But with him getting the reps as the starter, he is the preferred option out of the two until we see anything change. Plus, he's playing against Tampa Bay. It's a fantastic matchup. I think he's going to get a couple chunk gains, but I don't think he has a touchdown. Tyler Conklin has seen at least 5 targets in each of the past 3 games in which he's played. Here against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are definitely susceptible to tight end production. I think he sees quite a few targets in this game as a more so of a check down option, but we don't really care how he gets his fantasy points. We just care that he does get them. I don't think he has a touchdown though, and so I think he ends up as a low end tight end 2. Noah Gray had seen at least 4 targets in 5 straight weeks before only seeing 1 this past week. I think he is a little bit more involved in this game, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. Noah Fant has seen 6 and 7 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. Here against Chicago, this is a matchup he can exploit. We like the volume, and I think he gets a couple chunk gains. Juwan Johnson has only seen 2 and 3 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. Here against Las Vegas, though, they get obliterated by tight ends. I don't think he has a fantastic day from a volume perspective, but I do think he gets a touchdown. Pat Fryermuth saw his 3-game touchdown streak end this past week. Here against Kansas City, their defense allows the 3rd most points to fantasy tight ends. I don't think he gets a touchdown, but I think he's a little bit more involved and is the underneath option for Russell Wilson. Jake Ferguson is coming off a 9-target game this past week. We love to see the involvement. However, this week against Philadelphia, they do allow the 4th fewest points to fantasy tight ends, so it's a really tough matchup. If you can avoid him, I would, but he is a talented tight end in a tight end friendly offense. It's just that the matchup is pretty tough, and so I don't think he ends up with a touchdown, but I do think he sees a consistent amount of targets this week. And now we have tight ends that I think are mid to high end tight end 2s. We have Brenton Strange, Zach Ertz, Dalton Kincaid, and Dalton Schultz. Brenton Strange, after a 12-target, 11-reception, 70-yard game 2 weeks ago, only saw 4 targets this past week and lost a fumble. I think he's a little bit more involved here against Tennessee, but they do allow the 5th fewest points to fantasy tight ends, and so I think he's going to be a chain mover, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. Zach Ertz was among one of the most consistent options at tight end, but the past 2 weeks he's only seen 2 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. Here against Atlanta, they do allow the 13th fewest points to tight ends. I don't think he has a massive day from a target perspective, but I do think he scores. While it hasn't yielded massive results, Dalton Kincaid has seen 7 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. He's bound to find the end zone at some point. He's facing off against the Jets, who allow the 10th fewest points to fantasy tight ends, though. I don't think he ends up scoring a touchdown, but I think he's actively involved as a receiver. Now with Dalton Schultz, I expect him to take a step up from a target share perspective in the absence of Tank Dell. They did sign Deontay Johnson to the roster, but with him not even being remotely acclimated to the offense, I do think it's going to take a second before he can really contribute. And so I think that Dalton Schultz is realistically going to be the wide receiver 2 to 3 in this offense right now. And so I do think he's going to have a solid game, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. Make sure you check out my other positional rankings, being quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs as they come out. Thanks. And now we have tight ends that I think are low end to mid tight end 1s, but probably not candidates to be the tight end 1 this week. We have Tucker Kraft, Hunter Henry, Chigo Okonkwo, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, and TJ Hawkinson. Tucker Kraft has been really hit or miss this season. He doesn't generally get a ton of volume, but when he does hit, he usually has a massive week with the touchdown. Here against Minnesota, they do allow the 14th fewest points to fantasy tight ends, so it is a little bit of a tougher matchup. I do think he scores, though, salvaging his fantasy day. Hunter Henry has been remarkably consistent for us. He generally sees 8 to 9 targets, and he saw 9 this past week. Here against the Chargers, they do allow the 9th fewest points to fantasy tight ends, so it is a tough matchup. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I think he's heavily involved as a receiver. I don't know what's gotten into the Titans, but they have decided to heavily feature Chigo Okonkwo. He's seen 10 and 11 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. And so it's really starting to be hard to, until we see this go away, rank him outside the top 10. In the barren tight end landscape, targets are hard to come by. And so with him getting consistent targets here, he's an incredibly high upside play. Plus, he's facing off against Jacksonville. This is absolutely a matchup he can exploit. And now we have Sam Laporta. In each of the past 6 weeks, he's had at least 6 targets in every single game. Even in a tough matchup here against San Fran, who do allow the third fewest points to fantasy tight ends, he's an absolute must start. And what's starting to become a little bit more of a pass-heavy offense, I think that they're going to have to throw the ball quite a bit to win against San Fran. I do think they end up winning, but I do think that Sam Laporta is going to be a focal point of the offense, but I don't think he happens to score this week. Mark Andrews has scored in 8 of the past 10 weeks, and so while he hasn't received the elite target volume that we've seen in prior years, he's getting it done. I think he's going to do it once again and extend his touchdown streak here against Houston. While they are a really difficult matchup and allow the 7th fewest points to fantasy tight ends, he and Lamar Jackson have a special connection, and I do think he's a top 10 option. And now we have TJ Hawkinson. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but I do think that changes here against Green Bay. They're absolutely susceptible to tight end production, and I do think he gets it done as a top 10 option. And now we have mid to elite tight end ones that I think are realistic candidates to be the tight end one. We have Njoku, Kelsey, Smith, McBride, Kittle, and Bowers. Njoku is questionable, but I do think he ends up playing this week. If you started him last week, congrats to you. He came through, which was incredible considering DTR was his quarterback. He basically had the entirety of the passing yardage himself. And so good for Njoku. I think he's about as QB proof as it gets at tight end. He has a plus matchup. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I think he is the focal point of the passing offense. Travis Kelce, despite seeing a healthy amount of targets, is starting to see his production plummet quite a bit. I think here against Pittsburgh, he is going to score a touchdown, salvaging his fantasy day, but it is starting to get a little bit worrying. Jonnu Smith, in a really tough matchup against San Francisco, had 12 full PPR points this past week. Here against Cleveland, he has a much easier matchup. I think he's going to see heavy target volume once again, and he's going to be a top 5 option. Trey McBride was incredibly disappointing this past week. Now, I watched the game. He was wide open. Kyler was just scrambling for his life and just didn't look for him. And so I do think it was a blip on the radar. He's facing off here against the Rams. I think he's going to be the quick outlet for Kyler Murray because I don't think he's going to have any time to throw with him missing both of his starting tackles. George Kittle continues to produce top 12 fantasy finishes. He's only had 1 game for the entire season outside of the top 12. Here against Detroit, they do allow the fewest points to fantasy tight ends, but it's George Kittle. I don't think he has any issues, and I do think he scores a touchdown. And now we have Brock Bowers. He does find himself matched up here against New Orleans, who do allow the 11th fewest points to fantasy tight ends. I think he's going to be most of the passing offense, though. I think it's absolutely going to funnel through him. I think he's the tight end 1 this week, and I do think he scores a touchdown. And so to conclude, tight ends that I think are mid to low end tight end 2s this week, we have Hooper, Tremble, Conklin, Gray, Fant, Johnson, Freiermuth, and Ferguson. Tight ends that I think are mid to high end tight end 2s, we have Strange, Ertz, Kincaid, and Schultz. Tight ends that I think are mid to low end tight end 1s and probably not likely candidates to be the tight end 1. We have Kraft, Henry, Okonkwo, Laporta, Andrews, and Hawkinson. And then tight ends that I think are mid to elite options and are likely candidates to be the tight end 1 this week. We have Njoku, Kelsey, Smith, McBride, Kittle, and Bowers. All right, you know the drill. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Is there somebody that I'm not projecting for enough fantasy points? If so, let me know below in the comment section and let me know why. With that being said, make sure to check out my other positional rankings, and I hope every single one of you crushes your fantasy championships, or if you didn't make it, I hope you crush whatever matchup you're playing this week. Thanks.